and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK.
Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, happy Friday, and welcome to Patrick Christys Tonight. Why are ordinary members of the public having to step in and do the job of police and security guards? Is it now up to us to keep ourselves safe? And is stopping the boats the most important issue for you at the next election? Our exclusive polling data reveals what the nation's top issues are, how far ahead Labour is in the polls, and which former Prime Minister you'd most like to bring back. Talking of former PMs.
Hi folks, 2024 is almost upon us.
It is indeed. We will have a little New Year message from Boris Johnson to bring to you, and we'll be revealing the New Year's honours list. Some really surprising names on there. Elsewhere, the BBC's top jobs are filled with privately educated poshos. Is it any wonder they patronise the working class by constantly referring to them as drugged-up alcoholic thickos? They are infected with a metropolitan elitist mindset. And blokes should not be playing against women at grassroots sport. We will be joined by brave former British Olympian Mara Yamauchi, who is speaking out after men started setting records at women's parkrun events. On my panel tonight, we've got the wonderful Susan Evans, John Sargent and Michael Walker. This is Patrick Christys Tonight. Here we go. Email me right now. What is the most important issue for you at the next election? gbviews@gbnews.com. Exclusive polling data when we come back. But first, it's time for your news with Sophia Vensler.
Thank you, Patrick. Good evening. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Some breaking news in the last hour. 3 men who died after a 4x4 vehicle was swept away as they tried to cross a river in Yorkshire have been named by the police. Scott Thomas Daddy, Leslie Forbes and Kenneth Patrick Hibbins were found dead inside the vehicle after it became submerged in the River Esk near Glaisdale. Police say the tragic incident was caused by hazardous weather conditions that had badly affected the roads in the surrounding area. NATO is monitoring the situation as Poland says a Russian missile likely entered its airspace. According to the head of the Polish Armed Forces, both Poland and NATO's radar systems spotted an unidentified aerial object over the country's territory. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says the military alliance stands in solidarity with Poland and it remains vigilant. It's understood groups of soldiers are performing on-the-ground verification of the missile's flight path. Here in the UK, the government has promised to send around 200 air defence missiles to Ukraine after Russia launched a massive attack overnight. Officials say 31 civilians have been killed and at least 120 injured following a series of attacks on critical infrastructure and military facilities. One person has died in Scotland following an outbreak of E. coli. It's after the UK Health Security Agency confirmed it's currently investigating 30 cases across England and Scotland to identify any potential links to a brand of cheese. The Food Standards Agency has announced a precautionary recall of 4 products from Mrs. Kirkham's Lancashire cheese because of possible E. coli contamination. The family of a man who was killed while trying to save a stranger in Sheffield says tragic circumstances show the sort of man he was. Chris Marriott went to the aid of an unconscious woman when he was hit by a car which had ploughed into a crowd of people on Wednesday. She's in a life-threatening condition in hospital. A 23-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder and remains in custody, while a 55-year-old has been released on bail. A British woman and her son have died after an avalanche swept through the French Alps. The 54-year-old and her 22-year-old son were skiing with family on Mont Blanc when the disaster occurred. A search and rescue mission involving around 20 emergency workers lasted 5 hours. Authorities say another person, believed to be an instructor, escaped with minor injuries. And Maine has become the second US state to block Donald Trump from running as candidate in the next year's presidential election. Officials say the move is because of Trump's involvement in inciting riots when his supporters stormed the US Capitol in January 2021. Colorado reached a similar conclusion 9 days ago, although California's announced he'll remain on its ballot. Donald Trump's team has described the decision as atrocious and has vowed to appeal. This is GB News on TV, online, on DAB+ radio and on your smart speaker. This is GB News. Now, back to Patrick.
We are kickstarting the show with brand new polling data for you that we can reveal exclusively here on Patrick Christys tonight. The results are fascinating, but it's what's revealed when you drill down into the numbers that really tells you a heck of a lot about where we are as a nation. So here we go. To quote Chris Whitty, first slide, please. More than half of the country feel worse off than they did a year ago, 54% to be precise. And when asked if it's time for a change in Westminster, 66% of you tend to agree or strongly agree. Interesting there, though, that just 81% of Labour voters think it's time for a change. Well, what's happened to the rest of them? Only 74% of Lib Dems as well. Let's get into what the top priorities are for voters at the next election. So, first, it's the cost of living crisis, the money in your pocket. Second, it's improving the National Health Service. Record backlogs there, strikes, that needs sorting, doesn't it? Then we've got stopping the boats. That came in at 17%, but among Tory 2019 voters, that's at 35%, which is their highest priority. So Tories who voted in the last round think stopping the boats is their top priority. That's being echoed in my inbox so far, gbviews@gbnews.com. But then we come to overall voting intention. So this is the big one, really, isn't it? Labour would win 45% of the vote, the Tories would win 23%, and Reform would win 10%. That would put Reform level nationally with the Liberal Democrats. I think that's quite a remarkable achievement, really, isn't it? That would almost definitely hand the keys to Downing Street to Labour. But check this out. So drilling down into the numbers, we see that 38% of Tories who voted Conservative last time would vote for the party again if there was an election tomorrow. So just 38% of them. And 31% of people who voted Lib Dem last time say that they would now vote Labour. So when they're asked which former Prime Minister as well that you would most like to bring back today, can we guess who the winner is? Margaret Thatcher was first, Winston Churchill came in second, and Tony Blair is third. Interestingly, 17% of Labour voters wanted Gordon Brown compared to 19% of Labour voters wanting Blair. I wonder what's happened there. So there we have it, the latest round of exclusive polling data for us here at GB News. It's time to unpack this now with my panel. Let's get their thoughts, shall we? Former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent, we've got political commentator Suzanne Evans and the journalist Michael Walker. Suzanne, I'll start with you. Cost of living crisis, the main issue for you or not?
I think it's the main issue for the country. It's really got to be. So I'm not surprised this has come in at number one. I think for me, the most shocking thing about the polling data that we've just seen is only 38% of Conservatives who voted in the last general election would vote Conservative again. That is an absolutely shocking result for Rishi Sunak. Boris was immensely popular, swung into power with that 90-seat majority, and now only 38% would vote Conservative again. A shocking indictment of Rishi Sunak's leadership, I'm afraid.
John, in the inbox at the moment, I've asked people what their major issue is going into the next election. The most important thing is to send a message to the Conservatives and Labour that they have had enough by voting reform. That says Sarah. Well, 10% of the nation, Sarah, are with you on that. The overwhelming response is definitely immigration. John says immigration, both legal and illegal. Your thoughts on the immigration issue being in third, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem about this is that it makes no sort of direct comparison with the main parties. So you get a general feeling that what are you going to ask yourself on election day? And the answer comes back because it's sort of like a straightforward question. Well, how am I affected in terms of, the cost of living, in terms of the economy and how much I'm earning and how I'm doing? And that, of course, is the correct answer. But life isn't as simple as that. And it depends on what your constituency is, when the arguments take place, and whether or not you can clearly see a dividing line between the government at the moment and the opposition. And frankly, at the moment, it's rather muddled. You do not get a clear picture of what Labour would do. And so this poll, although it seems to be, so that's it then, we've decided what's going to happen in the next election, I don't think it's as simple as that. At the moment, the Conservatives are in deep trouble. They've not really decided when they want to go to the country. I think there's a strong argument for an early election.
That seems to be the noise. It seems to be the noise at the moment, doesn't it? We're going to get a May election.
So for all those reasons, although, yes, you get the dissatisfaction vote, it's absolutely clear, but don't expect too much in terms of, so that's it, we've got it now, we've got the election result. I don't think it's as simple as that.
Michael, you must be jumping for joy that reform exists. We've got 15% of the latest round of Tory voters saying they're going to vote for reform, and they are handing the keys to Downing Street to Labour, aren't they?
Well, it wouldn't make much difference anyway. I mean, if Labour are on 43%, then splitting the right-wing vote isn't going to be the decisive factor, is it? Obviously, didn't include the Lib Dems and the Greens. I'm not saying that's...
No, it's just because it was the same as 10%, yeah.
But in any case, I mean, I think what this polling shows is how difficult a situation Rishi Sunak is, because he's got to decide, what am I going to fight the next election on? And obviously, I think rightly, what people care most about is the cost of living crisis and the NHS. Now, in my view, the reason we've got a crisis in both of those areas is because of 13 years of Tory mismanagement. We had a squeeze in the NHS funding. It's gone back up now, but it doesn't really work if staff have left. You can't just throw a bunch of money at it and hope it's all going to fix itself within a year, right? So you've got this really long-term problem of their making. The same with the cost of living crisis. So people might feel worse off this year than they did a year ago. We're actually worse off than we were 15 years ago, right? So there has been zero wage growth in this country for the past 15 years. So neither of those things he can fight on. So then he's decided, OK, well, let's just go for immigration. We'll go for immigration. The problem there is he said this is the #1 issue for the country. Then he can't solve it.
Well, he's also
and that means the Tory vote is now split between them and reform.
The other thing with the immigration problem for Rishi Sunak is that he keeps saying, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to come down really hard on it, and then about 2 days later you get the old reverse ferret and people lose trust. I do think that the fundamental lack of trust here across the board is quite chasmous, really. Would you back that, though, Suzanne, that it's all the Tories to blame when it comes to the NHS and the cost of living crisis. I mean, we've had a war in Ukraine, we've had a pandemic. Also, when it comes to the NHS, I don't think the people whose job it is to run the NHS actually get enough stick.
Yeah, I totally agree, actually. I think we've got the NHS is a massive problem, and even more so now. You know, 7.5 million people on the waiting list. And I do disagree with Michael. It's not about 13 years of Conservative government. It's about, exactly as you said, it's primarily lockdowns, which also caused, of course, massive inflation, furlough, money printing, end of supply chains. Of course, inflation was going to rocket. There's no doubt about that. Same with the NHS. If you shut down the NHS and make it a COVID-only service, of course, there's going to be a massive backlog. And let's not forget that the Labour Party were pushing and pushing for harder, longer lockdowns all the time. So you can't blame the Conservatives for that. And now, one of the other statistics I'd just like to pull out is 66% of people saying they want change in Westminster. Well, yeah, it's not going to happen, though, is it? Unless people start to vote for smaller parties in a much, much larger numbers. And 10% form sounds very good, but it's probably not going to translate into a single MP in Parliament. That's the problem. So change in Westminster, in principle, people are clearly fed up with the whole shebang and the whole lot of them, but it's probably not going to change.
John, I'm just going to bring you in to talk about another thing that poll revealed, which is about former Prime Ministers that they would like to see back. And Margaret Thatcher was the out-and-out winner there when it came to which former Prime Minister you would like to, in her case, quite literally resurrect. So what do you make of that?
Well, I think it's interesting. If you think of the list, you think Churchill, yeah, bring Churchill back. And what might he do? Declare war on Russia or something? You know, so it's all to do with, you know, the general picture of there are these historical figures. In practice, if they came through the door, people would be stunned and think, oh, no, not that one again.
If they came through the door now, I think they'd be stunned. I mean, could you imagine what Thatcher or Churchill would be?
Horrified. But the idea that you would then settle them down, and this sort of idea that what you need is a great Prime Minister. No, what you need is someone at this precise moment to consider the problems and convincingly explain the way out. That's what you really need, and you need that now. And to say, oh, well, there's Churchill, what would he do? And what would Margaret Thatcher do? At the end of Margaret Thatcher's term, she was amazingly unpopular. There were moments of terrific achievement. There were certainly terrific achievements for Blair. He won 3 elections. So you look back on these characters, you've got to consider what it was like for them and for all of us at the time that they were in power. That's what I'm saying. Now, I don't mean to... So if you look at this, you say, well, who do you really think could walk through the door and at least start to talk about the problems of today? The answer would be Tony Blair.
Blair came... So you'd have Blair back? Good grief.
No, in the question of... You've got these 3 possibilities. Who do you think could walk through the door and help?
He's got the advantage of being alive, I suppose.
He's got the advantage of being alive.
He could at least walk through the door, yeah.
No, but he's also considering a lot of these issues. That's all just happens to be the case.
He's getting very well paid to do so, isn't he? Although I suppose actually he doesn't take the money.
What do you make of that, though, when you look at it in terms of who people would most like to bring back?
I think it's a shame that Attlee's not on there. I mean, as someone who disagrees with Margaret Thatcher, I can see why she's on there, because she was a consequential Prime Minister. She had a critique of what was going on in society and a sort of her version of how to solve
Clement
it.
Attlee scored at 2%.
2%?
2%.
Very, very
Can
depressing.
I just say the biggest one was Don't Know with 39%?
Yeah.
So there is
I'm in that category.
Yes, yeah, but...
that's about you, is it?
That's me. I'm the 39%. But that's all right with you, too.
It's not exactly a ringing endorsement for any of them, is it, really?
No,
but
of course it is.
One thing that all 3 have got in common is they are strong leaders of conviction. And I think that's what people think politicians are lacking now. They blow like a reed in the wind, depending on what's popular, what's not, what the latest poll says. They change their minds like the weather. I think this to me says we want a leader who says what they think and does what they say.
You know, also charisma we want. That's the other thing with those 3. Somebody who fascinates them, somebody who then says, oh, you know, leader of the opposition's on the box now. He's doing an interview. Can you imagine people saying, oh, we must watch Keir Starmer. I'm sorry, I've got to cut off what we're doing now. People won't, or even the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister's on now. You look at the figures. Yeah. Some of these key moments.
The only time I've ever seen him get really energised when he was sitting on Elon Musk's knee talking about artificial intelligence. I thought, good grief, you know, we used to just have strong words with nerds like that at school, didn't we? Now they run the country. So there we go. Look, I think the overwhelming take for me is this, right, which is that 66% of people think that they want real radical change in Westminster. But then when you look at a load of Tory voters that are thinking of voting Reform, a load of Lib Dems are looking at thinking of voting Labour, and 81% of Labour voters are actually desperate for change. So what the heck is happening to the other 19%? I think there's a heck of a lot of politically homeless people out out there. It's echoed in the inbox, gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep those emails coming in. I will go to those shortly. Patrick, I am living in a different world. Town centres are very busy, expensive coffee shops and restaurants. No for cost of living crisis for Faye, she says. Loads of people saying that really their main issue is immigration. So certainly for the GB News viewers, shock horror, immigration is the big issue. I am inclined to agree with you, both legal and illegal. I think a lot of the other problems in this country would be sorted out if we had that under control, but the Tories didn't do it. Still to come. Should grassroots sports like the local park run lose their funding if they allow trans women, so men, to compete in female categories? Now, former Olympian Mara Yamauchi isn't pulling her punches. She joins me live. But up next, is it a problem that the BBC's top jobs are still packed with privately educated people? Star of the TV hit Shameless, Tina Malone, goes head-to-head with Apprentice star and the ever-outspoken Ryan Mark Parsons. The theory is that the BBC just patronises the working class and their diversity quotas are all wrong. Don't move.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
How would you feel if a bloke turned up and won your local women's park run? A bit miffed, I imagine. Well, former Olympian Mara Yamauchi is going to be joining me on why trans athletes need to be banned from competing against women at grassroots level. But right now, though, it's time for our head-to-head. And in a Sun newspaper exclusive, BBC figures show that more than a fifth of its highest earners went to a private school. So BBC pay statistics reveal that 22% of the corporation staff are on more than 150 grand, and they went to fee-paying schools, with high-profile names including presenter Laura Koonsberg, World Affairs editor John Simpson, royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell, etc. Now, earlier this month, a report by Ofcom found that the BBC's politically correct programmes show the broadcaster is out of touch. The regulator said that the Beeb's portrayal of the working class used extreme stereotypes, such as emphasising criminality, drink and drug cultures and financial hardship. So tonight I am asking, is it a problem that the BBC's top jobs are still packed with privately educated people? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, and get on Twitter @GBNews. While you're there, take part in our poll. The results to come very shortly. But to debate this now, I am joined by TV personality Ryan Mark Parsons and actress Tina Malone. Both of you, thank you very, very much. Great to have you both on the show. Tina, I'll start with you, ladies first. So, do you think it's a problem, then, that the BBC's top talent is packed with privately educated people?
I think what happens is if you were born into a situation where you have money, which is great, and, you know, I wish I had been, you are more likely to go to a good school and more likely to go to university. Most people nowadays, working class, are struggling to put food on the table, let alone, like you mentioned before, drink or drugs, and also less likely to push their children, I guess, into education, mainly because they can't afford it. So if you are going for a top job at the BBC, if you've been to university, you are showing application, you are showing that you are intelligent, you have got to a certain level in your education, and so you are more likely to get the job. It's that simple. I mean, it right from newsreaders, right through to The Apprentice, right through to most dramas. I mean, I'm always going to be the guest. I'm never going to be the host or the presenter. I mean, you imagine me reading the news here, get on this, Boris Johnson's a liar. We've just found out after COVID.
I'd watch it. I'll be honest with you, Tina. I'd watch the living heck out of that. But you know, maybe that's a window into your future. But Ryan Mark, I'll bring you in now. What do you reckon to this? I mean, I think you have quite a radically different view. You don't see any problem with it?
No, I don't see a problem. I just think people are trying to find an issue really with nothing. I find that those people, the bosses at the BBC, like Tim Davie, for example, Director General, he went to Whitgift School, which is a boarding school in South London. These people are educated people. I can attest for that. I went to a private school. I know the level of education and what it's like comparatively to friends that went to state schools. You're getting sorry, let me finish. You're getting a good level of education, and I think that's all really it should come down to. These people are made for these jobs, and I don't see the issue. Why would we hire, for the sake of diversifying talent at the BBC, people that aren't as equipped as those that came from a private school?
Okay, all right, Tina, go on, come back. Try and talk over
Why not listen to people? Listen to the demographic that you are commissioning programmes for. Why just go to the posh people? Listen, don't get me wrong. I haven't got a problem with whether you're upper class, middle class, working class. If you deserve the job and you're educated, good luck. But what I'm saying is, if you look at Eddie Redmayne next to, say, Ray Winston, who's worked harder to get to where they are, to become accomplished? Eddie Redmayne's a wonderful actor, as is Ray Winston. Ray worked twice as hard because he wasn't born into a family that could, you know, relieve the stress of education, of studying, of going to these, having the opportunities. Do you understand? That's all I'm saying. It's about equal opportunities.
Is that fair, though, Ryan Mark? Because I get what Tina's saying there, absolutely. And I think that there are some professions where maybe nepotism and opportunity knocks more if you are born into wealth. And I suspect the acting profession is one of those, right? I'm not sure if the same applies. Well, maybe it does in media. I don't know. Go on, Ryan Mark.
Well, I think Tina is just being really pessimistic, jealous. It just sounds very bitter to me. I think if you're talented
I'm an award-winning
and you're good at your job, which is likely to be the case if you've come from a private school, I just think that should be celebrated. I don't think you should demonise people that have come from a private school and therefore not allow them to access these jobs. And also, I went to a private school in South London, very diverse. I think there's this skewed perception that if you went to a private school,
Okay, can I just interrupt?
white millionaires,
I
my
went to the
private school
same
was very
school.
diverse.
I was
lots
head
of
girl of
backgrounds,
Blackburn
lots of
House.
faiths, lots of
As was
ethnicities. You
Edwina
can't
Curry.
just assume
Edwina Curry
that people from a private school come from a certain
I was
background.
extremely bright. But unfortunately, I was extremely bright. I went to the same school as Edwina Curry. I was head girl, as she was. But what I'm saying to you is, we didn't have the money available to push to university. And unfortunately, not everybody is given that opportunity. That's all I'm saying.
Well, it's actually more advantageous if you're applying for Oxbridge, for example. You're more likely to get accepted if you've come from a state school in 2023.
I'm an award-winning actress. And I've got, next you're going to say, I have a chip because I'm a Scouser or I'm from the North. I've dealt with that all my life, darling. I'd eat you for breakfast, seriously. I'm 3 times older than you. Trust me.
You need to stop complaining. You sound very negative.
One at a time, one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. Right, Mark, do you accept that
enough experience working for Channel 4, the BBC, BBC 2, and done period dramas right through to other programmes, right? And I respect the BBC. I've even put my glasses on to look more intelligent so that I might get a job to be. But what I'm saying to you is, I mean, banter aside and all that, what I'm saying to you is, if you are at the top of the BBC and you are a commissioning editor or an executive producer, you are more likely to have been to, you know, Cambridge, Oxbridge, whatever. But what I'm saying is, you should open the doors, because some of us, Vickies, as you call us, do have wonderful ideas.
Well, this is interesting. So this is interesting because, Ryan, I think you were making the point that now Oxbridge are trying to favour working-class students. Is that right?
Yeah, a lot of these universities, especially Oxbridge, they're favouring students, applicants from low socio-economic backgrounds. So I think that just goes to show that these elite establishments are making steps
moving in the right direction.
Tina, please stop talking over him. I know you feel very strongly about it, but we've got to let him talk.
Yeah, so I just think there are positive steps being made. And ultimately, when it comes down to an interview, the BBC is a corporation. It is a business. They need to hire, as any other business, the best people for the role. Now, if that person happens to come from a private school, what's the issue with that? Are we just going to stop talented people from accessing the best jobs? The BBC needs to deliver top content. People are paying a licence fee for a reason. Why are we going to disqualify people just because their parents happen to pay for their education? Tina needs to stop being so negative, bitter, jealous. It's a really repetitious tune that needs to end, because you get nowhere with complaining and being negative like she is.
Tina.
But if people like you continue to run these establishments,
I'm not running any establishment.
The majority of the BAFTA-winning actors, the majority of the BAFTA-winning writers and producers tend generally to be from the working class. Jimmy McGovern, Paul Abbott, Willie Russell, all these people, the Beatles, whoever, they are all working class. So what I'm saying to you is, give people an opportunity, darling. I ain't never bitter.
Many opportunities. What are you talking about?
Never been bitter or jealous.
So you're saying there's no opportunities for those that haven't gone to a private school?
Hard to accomplish.
Is that what you're saying?
No. Sorry?
Are you saying there's no opportunities for those that haven't come from a private school?
No, I'm saying they're moving in the right direction, albeit too slowly, too little, too late. We need to do that much more. That's what I'm saying.
OK. And I wonder as well, actually, whether or not the BBC is doing it in the incorrect way, because they do these things like, you know, diversity applications, etc., which, all right, fair enough. But one of the problems with a diversity application is that if you just do it based on ethnicity, that person could have still gone to Eton and Cambridge, right? So it's not a specifically working-class application. We're going to have to leave it there. I would have loved to have carried this on all night, but I do hope we can do this again. Can I just say thank you, both of you, very, very much. Proper head-to-head. You'd love to see it. Tina Malone there, actress.
Thank you.
And we've got, take care, and we've got TV personality Ryan Mark Parsons. Thank you very, very much. Now, a spokesperson for the BBC said, we want the BBC to be for everyone, and the latest figures show that 21% of staff are from low socioeconomic backgrounds, a target of 25% by 2025, so they slapped a target on it. We continue to invest in talent schemes and youth outreach projects, and we increased apprenticeships to record levels in the last year, but what do you think? Is it a problem that the BBC's top jobs are still packed with privately educated people? Susan on Twitter says, of course it is. How can there ever be true equality under such a system? The entitled, privately educated upper middle classes are utter hypocrites, preaching to the working classes about white privilege. while systematically keeping most of the privilege for themselves. Elliot on Twitter says, I'm less concerned with their educational background than I am with the obvious lack of viewpoint diversity. Yeah, but Elliot, I wonder if that's a part of it, right? I wonder if that is a part of that metropolitan elite. I don't think it's a private school thing. Genuinely, I don't. I think it's a mindset thing. And I think it's important to differentiate between those. Mark on Twitter says, that's not the problem. Being so woke and distant from the audience is the issue. OK, all right, there we go. Your verdict is in, so we did a poll on this. 73% of you agree that it is a problem that the BBC's top jobs are still packed with privately educated people. 27% of you don't think it is. Coming up, this guy must have forgot his Tesco Club card. But all jokes aside, is it actually just up to us to look after ourselves? It took a brave member of the public to take that guy down. Where were the police? What are the security guards doing, OK? Are we on our own now? I'm going to be putting all of this to Met Detective Simon Harding. But next, astonishingly, the last 3 female parkrun records were held by biological males. So the woman that helped to expose this sporting injustice to the nation is Mara Yamauchi, and she joins me live next, a former Olympian. She wants to see trans athletes banned from grassroots sport. She will explain why in just a moment.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Should grassroots sports lose their funding if they allow trans women to compete against other female athletes, or just female athletes, I should say? That's the recommendation in a report from the Policy Exchange think tank, who say that the threat to women's sport goes far beyond elite competition. And that's been evidenced up and down the country. Trans footballer Francesca Needham recently caused a season-ending knee injury while blocking a shot. Trans rugby player Julianne Curtis was banned from playing the sport only last year. And then there's this British sporting institution, the Park Run. Unbelievably, biological men hold at least 3 Park Run female records. Well, in May this year, Sean Longthorpe, who was living as a married man until 4 years ago, smashed the record in the 45 to 49 age category by a full 1 minute and 13 seconds. That was rightly put in the national spotlight by former Olympian Mara Yamauchi, who said this meant the erasure of female achievements. I'm delighted to say that Mara joins me now. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. It's rare that I get to speak to an Olympic hero, so thank you so much for joining us. Why do you feel so strongly about this? What should be done?
Before I answer that, let me just clarify from your introduction. You said I want trans athletes banned from grassroots sport. What I want is people born male, so men and boys, banned from the female category in grassroots sport.
Yes.
I think trans athletes must be welcome in grassroots sport. So I think the female category must be for people born female, you know, female sex at birth, that we only have 2 sexes, you can't change your sex. If you're born female, you go in the female category. If you're born male, you go in the male category, or the open category, as some sports have called it. And there's been a lot of talk that this should happen at elite level, but not at grassroots level. And I oppose that because I believe females at all levels, all ages, all abilities deserve fairness.
Does it really matter, though? If you're taking part in a park run, you're presumably there for the fun of it, are you? And does it really matter if somebody who happens to be trans turns up and wins it?
I think it absolutely matters. Females deserve fairness. Parkrun claim that they're not a race, but they have a start and finish line, a measured course, records, age grade scores, timekeeping. These are all the trappings of a race, and they have a category called male and another category called female. And they also have 2 additional categories, another gender identity and prefer not to say. So why do they have these categories? You know, the reason is for fairness. Males run on average at least 10% faster than females. So the female category is in and of itself an inclusion measure for females. So Parkrun basically allow any male or female into any of those 4 categories. And you have to ask the question, well, why are they operating 4 mixed sex categories? They need to go back to you know, protecting the female category for those born female at birth. And the consequence of males being allowed into the female category at Parkrun is, as you said in your introduction, males holding female records. I'm actually aware of 20 female Parkrun records held by males. 2 of those are outright female course records. The others are all age group records. And I've counted more than 150 occasions when a male has finished as first female at Parkrun, and that means that the actual first female across the line is recorded in the results as second female. Yeah. And Parkrun produce a whole load of really useful data and statistics, which I think is very motivating for people. One of those is this week's first finishers. So when a male finishes first female, the actual first female is not recorded on that list. You know, that's what I mean by the erasure of female achievements. Just on Christmas, on the 23rd of December, a male finished first female at Parkrun, and the first female across the line, so the second female officially in the results, was a girl. This is a really terrible message for girls to receive.
It is absolutely terrible for girls to receive that message, in my view. And in other sports, contact sports especially, I mean, it can seriously have massively damaging physical consequences in terms of injury. There are other obvious issues at play here when it comes to changing areas as well that may or may not apply depending on the facility, but certainly it's not something that any parent would, I would imagine, look forward to. Daley Thompson messaged something today, and he wrote something in an article about how, in his view, no woman could have ever got close to the times and the performances that any man was doing simply based on their biology. He wasn't having a go at female athletes. He was saying this is a matter of fact. Do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this isn't my or Daley's opinion. This is established fact. Males run about 10% faster than females at elite level and more at lower levels. In jumping and in throwing, it's even greater, the gap. In punching power, it's 162%. The gaps between male and female performers are absolutely massive, and this is because of your sex, whether you're male or female. It's not to do with, you know, have you got a great coach, have you got a great diet? If you compare like with like, the gap is enormous. And there, I mean, in 2009, I ran my personal best in the marathon, 2 hours 23:12. In that year alone, at least 1,300 men ran faster than me. And I was ranked second in the world in women's road running. So, you know, you can see that if you allow males into the female category, females will totally disappear from sport. And elite athletes are not born elite. We all start at the bottom as beginners and work our way up to the top. So that's why fairness and safety through a female-only female category at grassroots level is absolutely vital for females to stay in sport. We know that women and girls, especially teenage girls, drop out of sport at really alarming and disappointing rates. And frankly, allowing males into the female category will make that problem worse. You know,
have you received much pushback, Mara, for your views on this?
Yes, absolutely. I've had death threats. I've had people trolling me, abuse, you know, telling me to shut up. I get regularly emails through my website using language which I can't repeat on national TV. And it's noticeable that men who speak up, like Daley, I think don't get the same level of abuse that women like me or Martina Navratilova, Sharon Davis get. And I think this is a reflection that the trans movement actually is very misogynistic in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, we've had numerous different examples as well, haven't we? There's been Leah Thomas, I think the swimmer in America, who was a very average, in fact, by college swimming standards, actually quite a poor male swimmer who then was blowing all kinds of records and winning all kinds of things at college level in America. You know, that especially, I know that's not overtly grassroots sport, but that is where people get things like scholarships or people who've trained all their lives. And I think you were interestingly talking there about sucking the aspiration out of a lot of female athletes there. But we're going to have to leave it there just for now, Mara. But I would just like to say thank you massively for coming on. It's great to speak to you, and I do hope to talk to you again very, very soon, because unfortunately I don't think this issue is going away anytime soon. As former British Olympian there, Mara Yamiauchi. So Natalie Washington of the LGBTIQ+, hard to keep up these days, inclusion group Pride Sports, called the Policy Exchange report pseudo-scientific political propaganda, adding women in particular want to know that they can turn up and be included in sport, not have to participate in onerous and invasive sex testing to run around a park with their friends. I would just quite like to politely suggest that it doesn't take that much invasive or scientific testing to normally prove which one is a man and which one is a woman. But coming up, we will bring you a new message, a New Year's message from star GB News signing and former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So find out what this man has to say very shortly. But next, clean up on aisle 4 at Portsmouth Tesco's. Yeah, I'll show you the full shocking clip in a moment. Spoiler alert, it wasn't the security guard that put a stop to that. Plus, as the Daily Mail reveals on its front page that police give up on 4 crimes a minute. Has the UK given up on law and order? Is it now just on us to defend and protect ourselves? Former Met Detective Simon Harding responds to that outrageous stat very, very shortly.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back. Now, at a Tesco supermarket in Portsmouth last night, this happened. Well, besides that mad brawl, what myself and many others have noticed about that clip is that it's a member of the public, a bystander, who was eventually the one to take forceful action. Not security, not police. Now, Hampshire police have since confirmed that a 29-year-old man has been arrested. But must we always rely on ourselves for protection? I'm sick and tired of seeing ordinary members of the public having to stand up for themselves, and, OK, fair enough, maybe you should if push comes to shove. But isn't that what security guards are for? I've been in shops numerous times when things have kicked off or people have been stealing things and the security guards just stand there on their phones. You saw it there, didn't you, as well? You know, is it now just up to us? We almost certainly know that the police aren't going to come, and if they do, they won't be there anytime soon. Why? Well, it becomes, as there was a revelation today, that police are giving up on 4 crimes a minute without catching the perpetrators. So, how do we take back control of our country? Let's speak now to former Met Police Senior Detective Simon Harding. Simon, thank you very, very much. Are the public just going to have to protect themselves now, then?
Oh, do you know what? I mean, we've spoken so many times, haven't we, about this kind of thing in the statistics that are coming out, and it's, you know, people saying that things are going to change quickly, but they're quickly, you know, not changing quickly enough, really. And there's so many videos like the ones you've shown as well, where, you know, in fact, that's quite surprising that somebody else did intervene, because quite often it's just left to, you know, shop staff or, you know, and like you say, a number of security guards who who won't put themselves in the line of fire because, you know, they don't have certain powers. They think they do. They don't want to get hurt. And so, yeah, it's taking people like that gentleman to get involved to stop these things, which is.
But is that where we are now, though? Seriously, I mean, is that what it is? Is if you see something going on in the street, you should step in because someone whose job it is to do that. I'm not just talking about police here, by the way. I mean security guards, etc. The people whose actual job it is to step in and intervene in a situation like that are going to be on their phone or backing off and all of that stuff. And it's just up to us to look after ourselves. Is it really?
Well, I mean, you can't speak for everybody that does that. There are security guards up and down the country. There's people that work on the front of doors in clubs and pubs who do intervene in certain situations, even when they're not inside, just to protect members of the public. But, you know, when you look at those statistics, if you strip away all those crimes where there's no forensics, no witnesses, no CCTV, it's the other ones where there are leads where I think we're being let down now. Because, you know, even, and I have experienced this in the last couple of days, reporting an attempted robbery on behalf of somebody else. And because I didn't answer my phone back to the police, they closed the crime straight away, even though that it said there is CCTV, 4 places which capture the whole incident. People had their hoods off. You can see them. And now, if that is how quick you are to close it, now I don't swing the blue lamp very often, but before, when you have these dedicated robbery squads or dedicated burglary squads, all these people, you know, we would take that and we would see how far we could go with it. Look at that CCTV, identify that person. Send it out to the media to say, do you know locally who this is? And that kind of thing seems to have almost died into the point, well, if you can't supply the evidence yourself as a victim, then we're not going to then pursue it as we used to be able to do.
Yeah, and that feeds through, though, down to the public and, crucially, the criminals as well, Simon, doesn't it? I mean, I do think people who are criminally minded have stopped caring that much about getting caught now. There does appear to be a lot more brazen crime taking place out there. And, you know, you can understand why that mindset sets in like a criminal cancer, doesn't it? Because if it is up to you to provide CCTV of your own accord and answer your phone at exactly the right time, you know, there is somebody there who, by the sounds of it, has just tried to do a robbery who now will probably get away with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, if you stand on your soapbox, as I do quite often when I'm talking about these sort of things, you know, you can talk about discipline going back into the home and even back into schools, how, you know, the discipline at schools has gone, you know, almost completely. I went into schools and did a lot of talks before I retired around, you know, carrying knives and all sorts of, you know, and things about group mentality and getting caught, about if you are just part of the group, you're as guilty as somebody else, all that kind of thing. And people were allowed to do what they wanted in the classroom. They could get up, they could walk out, they could do whatever they wanted to do. You know, and if I said sit down, you know, listen to what I'm saying, you know, there were problems, and it's because really it starts from there. And if you take that kind of mentality out of home and out of school, and then you're released into the public, then the police officer walking around means nothing to you because that authority isn't ingrained within you already. You know, that kind of respect and authority is disappearing, and I think that's one of the biggest problems that we face.
Yeah, and I feel very sorry for the police, genuinely. I know that might surprise people because you do sometimes give them a bit of a kicking, but we need more of them. We do need more of them. I would be inclined to pay them a bit more as well because I think they do, you know, a really, really messy job at times. But I think you've hit the nail on the head when it comes to where a lot of this stuff starts. And later on in the show, we're going to be having a debate about whether or not crap parents lead to, you know, frankly, bad kids, and I think there's a logic there. You look at what's going on in schools. We've got 250,000 under 35s off on long-term sick. Now, I'm sympathetic to people who are genuinely sick. There's no way you're telling me that 250,000 under 35s at the moment in this country are genuinely off on long-term sick. It does start at home, I think, Simon.
Yeah, I think you do see that. I mean, you know, it's I'm not saying that it's every home. Of course, we can't say that because we know people that are different and they just have that mentality. But you know, that form of discipline, it doesn't have to be Dickensian discipline like we used to have when I was at school. But you know, there has to be that kind of respect and authority. So it's very, very difficult at the moment, and it's difficult for cops, isn't it?
We'll leave it there. Simon, thank you very much. Simon Harding there, former Met Police senior detective. Coming up, we dig into the Blair files as it emerges that former Prime Minister Tony Blair wanted to send asylum seekers to the Isle of Mull. That sounds like a Lee Anderson policy, if you ask me. But next, as Tory MP James Daly is slammed for saying most children who struggle in his town are products of crap parents, is that true? We'll hear from Boris and the New Year's honours list as well. What's not to love?
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast. There will be some frost around tonight before wet and windy weather arrives in time for the weekend. That's in association with a deep area of low pressure currently out in the Atlantic. This will sweep its way in across the UK as we go through the next 24 hours or so. Ahead of that, some quieter weather for a time as many of the daytime showers ease and clear away, leaving some clear skies for many, but a very wet and windy picture towards the far northeast of Scotland tonight. Under the clear skies, particularly towards eastern parts, likely to turn quite chilly, a touch of frost in the south, a widespread harsh frost across parts of Scotland. So a bit of a frosty start first thing on Saturday morning, but then turning increasingly wet and windy as this system makes its way in, pushing northeastwards as we go through the day. As that rain hits the cold air over Scotland, we are likely to see some significant snow, could see more than 10 centimetres in some places over the higher ground, could cause some travel disruption here. Elsewhere, an unsettled picture, but quite mild towards the south, highs of around 12 Celsius. Looking ahead towards New Year's Eve, and for many it is going to be a blustery day, strongest winds towards the south, risk of gales here, quite a few showers around, but a calmer picture across Scotland, some dry weather here and mostly light winds, though again towards the far northeast it is looking wet and windy. As we go into the beginning of the new year, it actually looks like it will be largely dry, but that may not last that long. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
It's 10 p.m. and this is Patrick Christys Tonight.
Hi folks, 2024 is almost upon us.
It is almost upon us. Shortly we'll be hearing a short New Year's message to you from Boris Johnson, who we'll be hearing a lot more from in the coming year right here on GB News. And doesn't the Isle of Mull look lovely? Tony Blair wanted to turn that into a migrant camp and send migrants to Rwanda and turn back illegal migrants. Look, all the left a bunch of hypocrites over illegal immigration. One Tory MP, though, has said that crap parents are to blame for most kids that struggle in his town. I think he's probably right, don't you? Parents are never to blame these days. It's always somebody else's fault. And The New Year's Honours List is out at 10:30. There are some absolutely bonkers names on there, and I will have all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages tonight in our press pack. Here to get busy on the sofa, I've got Suzanne Evans, John Sargent and Michael Walker. This is Patrick Christys Tonight. Happy Friday. All right, email me now. Who do you want on your dream New Year's honours list? Who needs to get a gong? Hey, look, I've done a lot for charity, but I don't like to talk about it. GBviews at gbnews.com. I'll see you after the headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Thank you, Patrick. Good evening. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. 3 men who died after a 4x4 vehicle was swept away as they tried to cross a river in Yorkshire have been named by the police. Scott Thomas Daddy, Leslie Forbes and Kenneth Patrick Hibbins were found dead inside the vehicle after it became submerged in a River Esk near Glaisdale. Police say the tragic incident was caused by hazardous weather conditions that had badly affected the roads in the surrounding area. NATO is monitoring the situation as Poland says a Russian missile likely entered its airspace. According to the head of the Polish armed forces, both Poland and NATO's radar systems spotted an unidentified aerial object over the country's territory. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says the military alliance stands in solidarity with Poland and that it remains vigilant. It's understood groups of soldiers are performing on-the-ground verification of the missile's flight path. And here in the UK, the government has promised to send around 200 air defence missiles to Ukraine after Russia launched a massive air attack overnight. Officials say 31 civilians have been killed and at least 120 injured following a series of attacks on critical infrastructure and military facilities. 1 person has died in Scotland following an outbreak of E. coli. It's after the UK Health Secretary Agency confirmed it's currently investigating 30 cases across England and Scotland to identify any potential links to a brand of cheese. The Food Standards Agency has announced a precautionary recall of 4 products from Mrs. Kirkham's Lancashire cheese because of possible E. coli contamination. The family of a man who was killed while trying to save a stranger in Sheffield says the tragic circumstances show the sort of man that he was. Chris Marriott went to the aid of an unconscious woman when he was hit by a car which ploughed into a crowd of people on Wednesday. She's in a life-threatening condition in hospital. A 23-year-old man is arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder and remains in custody, while a 55-year-old has been released on bail. A British woman and her son have died after an avalanche swept through the French Alps. The 54-year-old and her 22-year-old son were skiing with family on Mont Blanc when the disaster occurred. A search and rescue mission involving around 20 emergency workers lasted 5 hours. Authorities say another person, believed to be an instructor, escaped with minor injuries. And Maine has become the second US state to block Donald Trump from running as a candidate in the next year's presidential election. Officials say the move is because of Trump's involvement in inciting riots when his supporters stormed the US Capitol in January 2021. Colorado reached a similar conclusion 9 days ago, although California's announced he'll remain on its ballot. Donald Trump's team has described the decision as atrocious and has vowed to appeal. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
Welcome back. In just a moment, my panel and I will debate Tory MP James Daly's comments about parenting. They've caused quite the domestic. But first, I wanted to share with you a short, special message from someone that we'll be seeing a lot more of on the channel in the coming year.
Hi, folks. 2024 is almost upon us. So let's hope that the next 12 months are a great year for our country and a great year for the upstart, insurgent, dynamic news channel that is GB News.
Yeah. Big hand from Boris there. Time now for a little bit of reaction. Political commentator Suzanne Evans, former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent and the journalist Michael Walker. I mean, Suzanne, where to start with that?
Gosh, that was deep, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
So deep, I don't know where to start.
No, indeed. Shall we move on? The immortal public row over personal responsibility has reared its head again, this time through the medium of Bury North Tory MP James Daly, who I told the newspaper that most troubled children in his local care are the product of crap parents. Well, Daly was arguing that left-wing solutions to many social problems is to throw money at them and hope for the best, whereas actually poor parenting and lack of family stability, in his view, is a huge factor in these issues. He's since received massive backlash. But he was right, was he, to raise this issue? Do today's parents take enough responsibility for their own kids' behaviour? Michael, crap parents lead to crap kids, no?
Well, I mean, obviously parenting has a massive effect on kids' behaviour and how they grow up. I suppose the question for me here, so there's this big debate, isn't it? Is it the parents? Is it society? It's a bit of both, obviously. And I think the question for politicians is, what can you change? You know, we can't magically wave a wand and suddenly parents become better. So you can have these sort of policies where you send people to parenting school, which I think is always just seems a bit of a gimmick, or you can try and set up a society which makes raising children as easy as we can make it, right? So obviously we can't control how good a parent someone is, but we can make it easier to not have to struggle to pay the rent, or to not live in damp housing, or to have decent childcare and a decent school for that kid to go to. So yes, it's a truism, of course, parenting makes a massive difference, but a politician should really be talking about what politics can do.
John?
No, I agree with a good deal of that. I mean, the key thing is he's saying most children who struggle are the products of crap parents,
that's unfair.
Most who struggle, wait a minute, the people who are struggling, the children who are struggling, they may be mentally ill, they may have
Well, he was talking about
problems.
his...
Wait a moment.
I'm going to come into that for him a bit here.
But that
he was
is the
talking about
quote,
in his
though.
constituency, right?
All right,
in his
he's saying,
constituency.
all right.
So he probably knows them better than you.
No, but wait a moment. No, I think I know a bit about the English language. Yeah, I'm not sure he does. Most children who struggle in his town are the products of crap parents. Bad use of word crap, bad use of word parents. But I mean, this most people, you can't change that. It's what he just said, most children who struggle. So that's a most peculiar way of looking at his constituency. And you look at all the people who are struggling in one way or another because maybe they've lost their jobs, maybe they've done this, maybe they've done that, maybe
maybe they get stuck into cans of special brew at 9 o'clock in the morning and spend all the money on roll-up and fags and their kids are feral.
So most of them are doing that, are they? No, hold on a moment. The most means more than 50%, roughly. OK? That is an enormous number of people he's talking about. Most people who struggle. Lots of people struggle for a whole variety of reasons. And I suppose, it's not really relevant, but my parents separated when I was a teenager. So I know a little bit about, OK, so your parents, you didn't have stability at home. But hold on a moment, lots of other factors were involved.
I don't think that's what he's saying. He's saying overtly crap parents. And I don't think it's that controversial, Suzanne, to say crap parents do lead to potentially
but
feral kids.
Some do, sure, some do.
Absolutely.
But most.
I think the problem we've got here, I think what James was doing was raising an issue that I think is very important that not enough people talk about. Unfortunately, I think his delivery of his message was wrong. I don't think he should have used that C word. I think it was the right message, wrong delivery. People never talk about this. Any idiot can have a child, and frankly, a lot of idiots do. There are lots of people there we know who should never be allowed anywhere near a child, let alone being able to have one. There is no checks and balances to having children. Like I say, anyone can do it with no training, nothing. We're not taught parenthood and skills at school. You just have a child, and most of us, just battle along and do the best we can, and it doesn't work. But I think there is an issue also, is that there have been lots of social moves towards giving children a lot more freedom at a much earlier age, and I don't think that's good. I think kids need boundaries. They need, proper bedtimes. I was sat at midnight mass just a few days ago, and there was a child that screamed through the entire service. Now, what was a baby doing at midnight mass? It should have been in bed.
Or you meet these kids kids in the supermarket and the parents are shouting at them.
Yeah.
And you think, what? This kid can barely speak, let alone have the parents say, I've told you once, I've told you again. And you think, what on earth's that? Now, that's bad parenting.
There are some people that shouldn't have children.
But it's quite rare, though. You don't see that very often.
Look, Michael, I think there is a push at the moment for a lot of parents as well to kind of blame everything else. Oh, the kid, he's got ADHD. He's got ADHD. Well, he might actually just be quite naughty, you know. Or, you know, oh, look at this, you know. Oh, what are we going to do with him? What's the school like? Isn't this the school? My kids come home from school and he's like, well, you are the parent. You know, you're supposed to get them dressed, feed them properly, do whatever you can. And I just don't wonder if we're losing that a bit.
Well, I mean, potentially. I suppose the question here again is, what is the role for a politician? Is the role for a politician to lecture their constituents? And I mean, I do agree with you saying that most children who are struggling the result of crap parents, that is a very specific thing to say, not just because he's used the word crap, but because he is sort of disparaging the majority of kids who are struggling. And I think everyone will know very good parents who have kids who are struggling for one reason or another, right? So it's how do you help people become better parents? Because as you say, you know, you've said we can't legislate for who has kids, right? That would be a very grim society and a grim place we would be going to. So we've got to deal with the society in which we live and see what politics can and can't do.
But also, the politics of bringing up children involves not just the parents, but it involves the schools, it involves the police,
but look,
it involves...
whenever, you know what,
wait a moment. But it's not, these aren't excuses. These are just describe the world we live in. The key thing for parents, of course, is to love their children. Now, most parents, if not all parents, do love their children.
Well, they might love them, John, but they might love them. But all too often, when I see 14-year-olds stabbed to death in London, 14-year-olds stabbed to death in Birmingham. What were they doing? Oh, they were out at 11 o'clock at night, riding around on a moped, dealing drugs. Where are the parents?
Absolutely right. I totally agree. And there are so many parents out there who are themselves feral, don't know how to bring up children, and actually we need to start tackling it. And that is a job for politics.
Sure.
It's also a job for the police.
What does that mean, though? What would that look like? What's a practical policy proposal?
I'm very much a kind of state hands-off person. I don't think the state should get involved. I think the state is involved in far too much of our lives as it is. But when it comes to something like this, when you have a society that is emerging where children just are allowed to run riot in a way that they weren't.
I think it's also important to mention,
there were very few kids that were feral kids when I was
allowed to
run riot. And I went to an authorised state
There is a
school.
danger that we sort of talk about the world as if it's going to hell in a handcart. Crime is down. Violent crime is down.
It's not being
kids are actually
reported.
drinking way less than they used to. I don't think we do actually have this huge generation of feral kids. Kids are doing kind of OK. A lot of them are quite depressed, but that's not necessarily because of bad parenting. That might be social
It
media.
can't all just be like, oh, they shut the youth centres. You know, how many youth centres? How many youth centres were there?
I mean, there were a lot of youth centres. I mean, they got cut by 70%.
What, and now, do you honestly, really seriously think, though, that if there was a youth centre with a pool table and a basketball court, that kids would not be out dealing drugs and stabbing each other?
Well, I think it would make a difference.
Oh, come on, we never had that. I grew up in the countryside. We didn't have such things as youth
No,
clubs.
we didn't do
You know,
this. We ran all over. I was brought up in the countryside.
Drinking and taking drugs.
We were allowed to rush out of the door. Parents didn't see us for ages.
That's true.
It's not a denial either. There we go. No, right, look. OK, I skirted over this a little bit earlier on. We're just going to remind ourselves, because we needed reminding, obviously, of what Boris Johnson, the man who will be joining this channel next year, had as a little New Year message for you. So let's take it away.
Hi, folks. 2024 is almost upon us. So let's hope that the next 12 months are a great year for our country and a great year for the upstart, insurgent, dynamic news channel that is GB News.
So Boris Johnson, they're trying to deliver a message of optimism about 2024 being a good year for the country ahead. Suzanne, do you agree with that?
I'm really looking forward to him being on GB News. I have to say, I can't wait. I think he's going to be a brilliant contributor to the channel.
He's lost weight, hasn't he?
He's lost weight. You just made me laugh because you said trying.
Trying to
deliver a message of optimism. I don't know how much you guys are paying him, but I'm not sure you're getting your money's worth.
I will be honest. I would have liked a bit more from Boris there. But, hey, saving is best for when he's on GB News in the next year.
It's going to be fab, I'm sure.
And we can't wait. So he's... but what you can't deny is that he's lost a bit of timber, Michael.
He looks like he's lost some hair as well.
Ozempic, maybe.
Slightly worrying.
Well, I think he wrote an article about this. where he, from memory, said that he was on it for a bit, then it made him a bit sick and he's come off. So maybe he's done it the old-fashioned way. I mean, he's always jogging, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Jogging,
Especially when the
cycling.
cameras are
He's
there.
quite active, really. I never thought he was that fat. Everyone says, oh, Boris Johnson. I didn't think he was. I just think he's nice
He
and
looked a
cuddly.
bit thin, gaunt almost.
Gaunt.
Yeah, he should put some weight back on, I think, before he starts his GB News show.
Carrie, if you're listening, you know, get him fed up, all right? This guy's too
Feed your
thin,
man.
far too thin.
Feed your man,
but there we go. Well, look, yes, Boris Johnson will be on the channel in the next year. We're expecting quite a bit of him. He's going to be doing a lot for our election coverage, both here and stateside. We're also going to be getting a couple of specials from him, we hope, anyway, about Britain abroad and global Britain. So that could be quite interesting. So thank you very, very much, Boris, for giving an optimistic message about not just this country, but also this channel in the year ahead. Coming up, you've heard who my panel want to see on the New Year's Honours List. No, we haven't. Who do you want on the New Year's Honours List, Suzanne?
Well, I'd like to see Professor Carol Sikora. Great oncologist, one of the very few people to raise questions about cancer treatment during lockdowns, and I think very brave to speak out. So I think he'd be a good nomination.
OK, we're doing this because in about 15 minutes' time, we're going live with the New Year's Honours List that's being revealed. Quickly, John, who would you like on it?
Peerage for David Attenborough. Peerage for Simon Sharma, the historian. Couple there, both of them knighted, but not
Sir
peers
David
yet.
Attenborough.
And then there are all sorts of what?
Yeah, he's already got one.
already a
hasn't he?
sir.
No, he's sir, yeah, he's a sir, but you make him a peerage.
Right, OK.
That's a lord, right?
How much more does that guy want, you know? That's,
No, but hold on a moment. I mean, that's what you do in the honours list. You move people up from being knights.
But a sir
to
is
peers.
higher than a lord, isn't it?
So it's a perfectly reasonable suggestion.
Go on, Michael, what kind of
I'm going like Suzanne with a professor, Professor Ghassan Abu Sitta. So he was one of the British doctors who worked in the Gazan hospitals. For 43 days he was there, and in two of the famous ones that were attacked.
All right, OK. Well, look, thank you very, very much for that. Yes, shortly we will be revealing the New Year's Honours List, and for what it's worth, Liz Truss's resignation Honours List as well. There are some incredible names on there. I'll see you in a tick.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Now, Tony Blair has given his Labour Party a political headache as explosive documents from 2003 reveal that the then Prime Minister was getting increasingly tense over the number of asylum seekers entering Britain. Amongst a number of radical proposals presented to Blair was the idea of sending failed applicants to a third country, safe havens. Does that remind you of anywhere like Rwanda, for example, or maybe the Scottish Isle of Mull? Sound familiar? Yes. Well, today, however, the Labour Party are doing everything possible to kill the Rwanda plan. But does this new information, in fact, suggest that it's now time for Keir Starmer and his cohort to give the Rwanda plan cross-party support and solve this migrant crisis once and for all? To battle this out, I am joined now by former Conservative MEP and firebrand Brexiteer David Campbell-Bannerman and the former Labour advisor Mike Butley. Chaps, thank you very much. David, I'll start with you. Do you think now that this shows that Labour have to get behind it, they can see it's probably the right thing, they're virtue signalling?
Well, I thought what Blair actually said was rather good. And it's the same thing as Rwanda in the sense that he wanted a strong disincentive. I mean, actually, it reports that they thought they'd lose the court case at ECHR 2 to 3 years later. But in the meantime, there was a strong disincentive to people coming to Britain. And as Blair actually said, just return them, he said. So I think he's shown up Starmer with his policy. But it's very similar. And, Kenya's mentioned and South Africa for, more African origin asylum seekers. So, yes, I do think Starmer should toughen up because he's been shown up by Blair.
OK, Mike, come back to that then.
Well, I think the key point on this is that Blair considered this and then swiftly rejected it as an unworkable policy, partly in terms of how it would impact on the ECHR and the morality of the scheme as well, but also just on the grounds that it would be unworkable. It would conflict with the ECHR, it would conflict with international law, and it wouldn't solve the asylum issue. And instead, the Labour government went on and dealt with things in its own way. But to come back to Rwanda, and I think we've probably had this conversation before, the Rwanda policy, even if the government got its own way, which it seems incredibly unlikely to do with the courts, given the ECHR and given the Refugee Convention, it wouldn't stop the small boats. The small boats will continue to come. The problem with the asylum system in the UK is the fact that the government refused to process claims and refused to process failed arrivals.
Right, OK. David, do you want to come back to that?
Yeah, well, Labour talk a lot about process. I've been saying this recently. It's not just process. It is about providing a great disincentive. I mean, this memo was called the nuclear option. Yes, the Big Bang solution, it was called as well. It was a way of actually sending a very powerful message, as Rwanda is in many ways. I mean, we don't want to be sending tens of thousands to Rwanda, but frankly, once you send the message, once you send enough, a few hundred thousand, whatever, then everyone else gets the point.
The thing is, though, that I wonder, Mike, is that, when people like Lee Anderson come on and suggest sending something to the Shetland Islands or someone like that, or, the Tories, or the Orkney Islands, indeed. Sorry to the people of the Shetland Islands who will be concerned to have found out that Lee Anderson wanted to inundate you with illegal immigrants. But there we go. The Orkneys. And there's a lot of pushback, huge amounts of pushback, massive pushback. The Rwanda plan, obviously, huge pushback, despite the fact that, again, it was something that initially Tony Blair was actually floating the idea of. The UN do it. Several other countries are seriously considering it. I just wonder, though, Mike, whether or not it's one rule for Labour when it comes to radical policies and another rule for the Tories. Another non-immigration one, by the way, will be potentially what West Streeting is thinking about doing to the NHS. If a Tory floated that idea, they get crucified.
Which idea do you mean on the NHS?
Well, the fact that he says that it needs radical reform, and he's possibly leaving the door open to privatisation of some parts of it.
I think it does need radical reform. I don't think he's opening the door to privatisation of the NHS. I think what he is saying is that he will use what private facilities are available in the country while we clear the massive backlog, which has built up over the last 14 years under a Conservative government that's consistently failed to...
You could call that, with respect, Mike, you could call that what you want. I think a lot of people will think that that leaves the door open to privatisation. But anyway, carry on. My question was, do you think that Labour get away with this kind of stuff in a way that the Tories can't?
No, I don't. And I mean, let's go back to this, Tony Blair thing. So the National Archives have been released recently. There's been a story on Thatcher and Spycatcher and her releasing information. There's been this story on Blair. But I think the key point on this is a policy that Blair considered and then rejected as unworkable, and also as a policy that wouldn't, in fact, have solved the asylum issue. So I think that's the main point on that. And therefore, Labour don't really have a story to answer or an accusation to answer on that score. And you'll have heard what Keir Starmer said on the unworkability of Rwanda and his own plans to solve the asylum issue in the UK. But in terms of judging Labour and judging the Conservative Party, I think often the Conservative Party get an easier ride, to be quite honest with you. But you would expect me to say that. But I think once Labour get into power, which we expect will happen in the next year, then I think you and I will then be judging Labour on its track record.
Yeah, no, we will. David, do you think that Labour do have a question to answer when it comes to this kind of stuff? I mean, if they were considering radical action back then under Blair in 2003, look, let's be honest, we haven't had any radical action on it, and we are where we are. Is it just proof that something like that needs to be done if we're going to cut down on illegal immigration?
Yes, I mean, like to ask Mike, how are you going to stop the boats? Because all I'm hearing is you're going to offshore asylum processing, abroad. I mean, that might help a bit, but I mean, it doesn't actually provide the disincentive, which is at the core of what this memo that Blair was sent, and it's the core of the Rwanda thing. So how are you going to stop the boats, Mike?
I mean, I think the key thing with asylum is people are increasingly seeking asylum in safe countries because of war, because of conflict, because of climate change. And we know, even if you take the other two factors out of the equation, even if you only consider climate change and the fact that large parts of the planet are going to become unlivable, there are going to be scarce water resources, scarce food sources in coming decades, the rest of the world needs to take account of the fact that these numbers are going to increase. We're going to have to come together as Europe. We're going to have to come together as the Western world. We're going to have to come together as countries which are deemed to be less susceptible to climate change, at least in the short to medium term, and work out what are we going to do with these increasing numbers of people. They can't all come to the UK. They can't all come to Europe. They can't all go to the US either. So what are we going to do? We're going to need an international system that works. I don't think that the current system we have is going to be sustainable for the next 20, 30, 50 years. So some different decisions are going to have to be made, but they need to be
I'm sorry, but the Isle of... I mean, I'm really not against using the Isle of Mull or other places like that. Well, why not? I mean, it is there. I mean, why should it be other parts of the UK that have to suffer? The SNP, by the way, bang on loads, don't they, about being a place of refuge for everyone. The number of migrant hotels in Scotland is absolutely minimal. They take fewer migrant hotels than any other part of the UK. Why should it just be people living in big cities or people in, rural England, etc., that take these people? I mean, David, should we be looking at the Isle of Mull?
Well, why not? I mean, obviously, the islanders there will have their issues with it, as elsewhere. Blair was looking at the Falkland Islands as well, actually, and all of these things are disincentives. It's like, well, we want the cushy life in Britain, and you end up on an island, whether that be the Falkland Islands or Mull, actually is quite a sobering realisation. That it's not as easy as you thought. And that message gets back. And they, again, talked in the memo about sending a strong message. And Rwanda sends a strong message. It's about creating disincentives.
OK.
Otherwise, more people will die on the waves, unfortunately.
All right, chaps, thank you very, very much, both of you. I will talk to you both again very soon. Conservative MEP David Campbell-Bannerman and the former Labour advisor Mike Buckley. Thank you. Now, coming up, we will bring you the very first front pages as I tackle tomorrow's news stories tonight with my press pack. But who has made it onto the New Year's honours list? Well, the results are in. I'll be revealing all the sirs and the dames when we return. And, a couple of very surprising names on there. Stay tuned.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's bring you tomorrow's news tonight now in the liveliest pay-per review anywhere on telly. The very first front pages have just been delivered for my press pack. Well, The Independent says, end the show trial of free speech hero Jimmy Lai. The Hong Kong media mogul, pro-democracy activist and UK passport holder faces life in jail for publishing seditious material. OK, we're going to whiz on over now to The Sun. Pep's warning to aces after Grealish raid. This is about Jack Grealish finding out whilst he was on the pitch that his house, recently purchased property in Cheshire, had been broken into whilst his family was inside it. Be on your guardiola, The Sun say. City boss says be wary of social media. Yeah, that's obviously true, but also if you are literally playing in a televised football match, people do know that you're not at home, so at least there was panic buttons. And the police put a helicopter in the air very quickly, which is more than they would do for you and I, isn't it? But the Daily Mail, the most poignant honours of all. Heartbroken parents fighting bravely to win justice for the daughters they lost, given awards in the New Year's honours list. So the Mail focusing on, I think it's fair to say, the most honourable aspects of this honours list, which we're going to go into more detail on now. Parents who turned the anguish of losing their daughters into campaigns for justice take pride in the New Year's honours list. Diana Parks said it was bittersweet to be made a CBE for her tireless work since daughter Joanna Simpson was killed by an abusive ex-partner. And, of course, as well, there is Ian Russell, who said that his 14-year-old daughter Molly would be very proud of her legacy. He was handed an MBE for a campaign in the wake of her suicide. I'm going to bring my panel in now and we'll run through some of the other names on this honours list. I'm joined by political commentator Suzanne Evans. We've got former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent and journalist Michael Walker. I feel like we should run through some of the other names on this honours list, right? So, Sajid Javid gets a knighthood. In politics, former Chancellor, former Home Secretary has been knighted. I'll keep running and then we'll pick them apart. Michael Eavis is getting a knighthood. Now, this guy founded Glastonbury, OK, knighted for services to music and charity. I think he's quite a big Corbynista as well, from memory. I'm quite surprised he's taken it.
You put him on stage, didn't he, for that very famous speech.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised he's taken this knighthood. Maybe he'll turn it down, I don't know. Ridley Scott gets a knighthood. Director and producer Sir Ridley Scott, whose works include Gladiator, Alien, Napoleon, is made a Knight Grand Cross, which upgrades the previous knighthood. So there we go, well done, Ridley. Tim Martin gets a knighthood. This one was out a couple of days ago. The Wetherspoons pub chain boss, Tim Martin, avid Brexiteer as well, knighted for services to hospitality and culture. Now, can I just say this one I thought was a little bit odd, as much as I love her, right? Leona Lewis getting an OBE. So Leona Lewis, who becomes an officer of the Order of the British Empire. I'm intrigued to see what exactly has led up to this in the last year. Maybe I've missed something. I'm very sorry, Leona. I'm not saying you don't deserve it. I'm just saying, why now, really? Emilia Clarke, MBE, Game of Thrones star Emilia Clarke's been made a member of the Order of the British Empire, alongside her mother Jenny, as co-founders of Same You, which is a brain injury recovery charity. Paul Hollywood has been made an MBE, the Great British Bake Off judge. So he's an MBE, services to soggy bottoms. Mary Earps, star of Sport, and the recent winner of Sports Personality of the Year, England Lionesses goalkeeper. There's a heck of a lot more as well. Where to start with this? Sajid Javid, does he deserve a knighthood, Suzanne?
Oh, crumbs. You know, probably. I mean, honestly,
they all get them, don't they, eventually? You know, if you've done any kind of senior role in politics, I'm afraid it's a slam dunk. I think what annoys me is that you kind of get people like Sajid Javid, who've basically done their job and made a lot of money for it and been in the public eye, and they get the big ticket knighthoods, whereas some of the people working very, very hard for charities just get a humble CBE or an OBE. Yeah,
I suppose that is some of the more prominent ones as well, like it was saying on the front of the Mail there are parents who've been campaigning, very worthy campaigns. So that was good. I mean, Tim Martin getting a knighthood. John, your views on Tim Martin, the Brexit-backing Wetherspoons boss?
You know, there's always an element of political honours. I mean, the system is such that if you do well, if you've got friends in the right places, don't be surprised if it's easier for you to get an honour than it would be for the rest of us.
I'm quite surprised.
It sort of happens. So, you know, and you look round and say, well, who could they just give them something, you know, something nice that's not too bad? Oh, well, look, he did do a lot with Weatherstones. You know, he certainly did bring it forward and, you know, a good businessman must have businessmen somewhere.
I'm a massive fan of Wetherspoons.
So
I'm a massive fan of it.
You know,
it's the only place where I used to go in for a full English and a bottle of red wine when I finished the night shift at a previous employer. 6 o'clock in the morning, Liverpool Street Station, can't beat it. And it cost me nothing as well. Massive fan of Wetherspoons. It
cost you your health, Patrick.
To be fair, it did actually cost me quite a lot. I'm quite surprised that Michael Eavis is getting a knighthood and has accepted it. We touched on it earlier on. The Glastonbury founder, big Jeremy Corbyn fan. It doesn't seem like it's right up his street, does it?
Yeah, it's interesting, the decision to accept it. I mean, I suppose, looking at this, with Sajid Javid, obviously he's a guy who's achieved stuff, but it does feel a bit like cheating because you're giving it to your mates, aren't you? You're giving knighthoods to each other. Whereas I do feel like Michael Eavis and Tim Martin, you know, different sides of the political spectrum, but they have both undeniably created very successful British institutions. So I do think it makes more sense to give it to people who have undeniably sort of created something, but politicians giving it to other politicians, it seems a bit naff.
Sure, but bear in mind that most of the people who are given honours, when the whole total comes out, 3/4 of them will be people you've not heard of, but have done decent things and decent work. Because the system has changed a good deal. It used to be automatically, you know, all the sort of minor people in politics. In fact, the more minor they're more likely to get knighthoods because they didn't get any public acclaim. And, oh, shove them this, give them that. They've been loyal. There used to be a lot more of that went on. Although political honours were brought back, what you get from these things is of the big names, not many big names, are they?
Well, Mary Earps, star of was the England Lionesses, the goalkeeper for the England Lionesses, Sports Personality of the Year. I mean, Joey Barton's going to be fuming at this, but with respect, finished runners-up to Spain in the Women's World Cup.
I know, goalkeeper.
Do you think this is
I'm not thrilled to that appointment, I must admit. You know, you just think, wait a minute, we've got some fantastic...
But why her? Like, why her? This is what I don't... I mean, as the entire... presumably, the entire...
Well, she also had a campaign involving the shirt, didn't she? So I think Nike wasn't initially going to print a Mary Earp shirt, and then there was a sort of popular movement
so have an MBE.
Printed. Well, no one remembers the MBE or the OBE. I think Sir matters, doesn't it, or Dame.
Would you accept a knighthood?
No, I wouldn't accept an OBE or an MBE because you've got the association without any gain, right? Maybe a knighthood. I mean,
right, here we go. His eyes have lit up now. Yeah, there we go.
Yes.
Yeah.
I see one of my heroes has also got Jilly Cooper.
Go on, yes.
Oh, I love Jilly Cooper's works. Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
she's got one as well, which is great. So.
Good, all right, OK, well, there we go. We'll get your reaction coming in thick and fast, gbviews@gbnews.com. And it has been revealed that Labour spin doctor Alistair Campbell proposed legal action against the BBC for their coverage of the Iraq War 20 years on. Should we really be that surprised? I know one of my panel in particular feels incredibly strongly about that. That's in tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But first, there are still many more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages to get our teeth into. You'll get a very first look at those, much more of them, with my press pack. Don't move, I'll be back in a tick.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, welcome back. We're going to take a more detailed look now at some of tomorrow's front pages with my press pack. So let's go with the Mirror. There it is. Heroes and Zeros, snub for legends, top gongs to Tory fat cats. Honours farce again, they say. So, the New Year's honours list rewards, this is the Mirror, of course, Tory donors as charity heroes Kevin Sinfield and Rob Burrow are refused knighthoods again. Tycoons given gongs include taxi mogul John Griffin, who has handed the Tory party £4 million. Liz Truss's resignation honours list also slipped out, rewarding 11, as they say, cronies. The Lib Dems have piped up and said that this calls the honours system into disrepute. There are a heck of a lot, may I just say, of Lib Dems in the House of Lords, by the way. So, you know, there is that. OK, The Guardian now. Courts and NHS will not recover until 2030s. Yep, so IPPR study says that next government will inherit huge challenge to restore public services. The courts backlog rarely gets spoken about enough, I think, but it is massive. People waiting. It's especially bad for innocent people who are awaiting a trial for something who then get found not guilty, and, of course, victims. Outstanding in his field, yes, I like that in The Guardian there, talking about Glastonbury co-founder Michael Eavis getting a gong. The Telegraph now. UK ramps up Ukraine arms after Kyiv attack. So Shaps has ruled out air defence missiles. This comes after Russia launches its biggest ever assault, which targeted largely civilian areas, including hitting a tower block, etc., in Kiev. Work-from-home passport, Bosch awarded in New Year's honours. Trust gives Brexit supporters gongs. There's a lot on the honours list there, of course. Damehood for Jilly Cooper, which will please Suzanne no end, with a picture of Jilly Cooper. The Times has got a story that we are going to be focusing in on now. Sent jogging by the boss to keep you fit for work. Scheme hopes to combat long-term sickness. Now, job centres and bosses will refer people to therapy or running and gardening clubs to keep them well enough to work in an attempt to tackle long-term sickness in the benefits system. This comes hot off the back of a story that came out today showing that just under 250,000 under 35s are off on long-term sick. Suzanne, do you think this is good?
Literally just seen this and I'm steaming. I am incensed by this headline, absolutely incensed. I founded a charity called Lipedema UK. It's for women who have this particular health problem.
Yeah.
Jogging is the worst thing you can do for that condition, and yet it's massively underdiagnosed. Most women who have it don't know they've got it. Any boss that sends a woman like... I'm just incensed. This is like... you know, it's, people are fat and they're unfit. Let's make them jog without any sense whatsoever of the individual circumstances of people. I'm sorry, I'm spitting feathers at this.
You are, clearly. No, well, this is good. So
it's horrendously bad for some people, jogging. It just is.
I mean, I suppose it does say that they could also take part in therapy or a gardening club.
Yeah, well, fine, but yeah.
OK.
Something. But, you know, it's just trying to have a one-size-fits-all solution for problems.
I mean, the thing is that we do need to get people off long-term sick.
I know, but how about saying, would you come into work, please? And then when I say please, I mean you are going to, or you'll lose your money.
Well, yeah, but unfortunately, John, it's not working, is it? Quite literally.
It's extraordinary how many people, civil servants particularly, are still somehow working from home when they should not be.
And then the passport boss, who told everyone to stay at home, caused absolute chaos, has been rewarded in the New Year's honours.
But, you know, the years go by. You know, we're now well over a year after the sort of COVID thing is over for most people. And it just seems extraordinary.
You know what I think?
People saying, it's all, the work-life balance is all changed now. We can make it up as we go along. No, you can't. You'll do what the boss tells you to do.
I do have genuinely every sympathy, and I hope that goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. I have genuine sympathy for anybody who is off on long-term sick and is genuinely long-term sick. I am deeply sceptical about the exact numbers of people who are off on long-term sick. We have a huge number of people, especially some of the under 35s, and I wonder whether or not, Michael, sucking the aspiration out of people's lives with things like home ownership or whatever really has made it easier for under 35s to go, I'm going to just do the sick.
I mean, it's difficult to say. I mean, this is interesting. I mean, hopefully it won't be one size fits all. The idea of sort of giving people sort of more services to try and, or more advice to sort of try and make themselves fit for work. I suppose why I'm often wary with sort of stories like this is because I know what happened after 2010, whereby you had lots of people who were off sick, long-term sick, and there was a plan by the Conservatives to get them back into work.
Yeah.
What they did was they got a private company to do all of these really dehumanising tests on people, where they were told they were fit to work if they missed a meeting, for example, and they couldn't get to the meeting because they were severely disabled.
We're a bit too soft, though, Michael. I mean, there's a happy medium. I mean, I think people really are taking the mick.
Well, I suppose you need some evidence, because to say there are this many people who are off sick, that could mean that there are lots of people pretending. It could also mean that we've got a society which is making lots of people sick. I mean, we did have a COVID pandemic. Lots of people do have long COVID. I know people seriously sick, long-term, from long COVID. I know a lot of it is mental health. You might be on something when it comes to aspiration, though.
I think
what's the point of increasing my income if I can't afford a house anyway?
I really do worry massively that there is... And this does require fundamentally a bit of get up and go about yourself to just overcome this, because I'm sure we've all had moments in our lives where we wanted to throw our hands up and go, what's the point? But it would be nice if I think there was a little bit more of a carrot somewhere along the line for people to give them that rocket up the backside and help them out a little bit. We now have time for Greatest Britain. Oh, no, what are we doing? We're moving on. We go Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Let's do that, because there's actually a story that I wanted to cover, which is in one of the papers tomorrow, that somebody is going to be talking about. So let's do it. Greatest Britain, Union Jackass. Right, we start with Greatest Britain, and then we gradually descend into the gutter. So, Suzanne, who's your Greatest Britain?
So we've already mentioned him. It's Tim Martin, the boss of Wetherspoons. Like you, Patrick, I love the Spoons. I think they're great, especially in this cost of living crisis. Great company, great Brexit supporter was Tim, so congratulations to
OK, so you're going Tim Martin as your Greatest Britain. John?
I'm going for Ruth Major. You won't have heard of her.
No.
She's a retired teacher, and you may have read about her. She used her free bus pass to travel around the country picking up litter. Now, it may seem to lots of people how, you know, pointless and all the rest of it, but she's doing good stuff there. You know, we want litter picked up, and she's a wonderful example, so she's my hero.
She's your hero. That's quite a nice, heartwarming story, actually. Michael, who's your Greatest Britain?
I'm going with Caroline Aherne. So there was a BBC documentary about her very recently, obviously taken too young, of course. And I think the reason I picked up, one, I watched one of the Christmas specials over Christmas, very, very enjoyable. But also, you know, Ricky Gervais has been in the news this week. I'm not going to sort of say he should be cancelled, but something that's really nice about Caroline Ahern's comedy is it's not cruel. You know, it's all about sort of bringing people together, and I think it's much more impressive to make comedy which isn't mean.
She was one of the writers of the royal family, is that right?
Yes, the creator, the co-creator.
She did, yeah, right, brilliant.
The main creator, yeah.
I should have said that in my introduction.
No, that's all right. No, so, she also friends with Noel Gallagher as well, who spoke very highly of her after she passed. Right, OK, today's Greatest Britain is Tim Martin. Yes, that's right, there we go. Sir Tim Martin, soon to be, and, you know, other winners could have been, but no, that's the one. Union Jackass is the one that I really like. So go on. Right, OK, so let's run ourselves down the line again. Suzanne, here's your Union Jackass.
So it's the security guards in Tesco
yes.
that you were talking about earlier, Patrick, who couldn't contain an unruly customer and left it to another customer to do it. What a shambles.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely fuming about it. What is the point of having security guards employed there to watch people shoplift? I was in a shop, I was in a Tesco's around the corner from here, actually, and a bloke, you could see he's kind of coming in a mile. He tethered his Staffordshire Bull Terrier up with a bit of rope outside, put his hood up, walked into the shop, swept things into a bag, just walked straight past two security guards, undid the leash of the dog and walked off. And they stood there for ages. And just like, what's the point? And that's before anyone gets violent. But there we are. John, who's your Union Jackass?
I'm afraid he's been nominated many times before, but Donald Trump, honorary jackass. But if he could just imagine a dream world where he decides not to run for president.
I like
Joe Biden then decides that he won't run, and you could have a normal presidential election in the biggest, most important, not the biggest democracy in the world, but the most important democracy in the world, could then be back on course. This is heading for a constitutional disaster, if they're not careful, which will affect and dominate American politics, not just for this year, but for the next 4 years of rowing and all the rest of it, which is very difficult and hard for even the Americans to cope with.
I mean, it is a dream for America's enemies. The idea that Biden would still be in power with potential, you know, cognitive decline. No, not really potential, is it? I mean, I don't think he's that well. And then Trump, with everything that would go with it, I'm a fan of Trump. I would be happy to see him as the president of the United States again, don't get me wrong. But the way that the US would then react to that, I mean, again, if you are Russia or China, you are probably loving that. Michael, who's your Union Jackass?
I'm going with Alistair Campbell. Now, plenty of reasons why one could have chosen him, but they've just released the archive. So every year they release the archive from 20 years previously. What we're seeing now is the sort of legal threats that Alistair Campbell was putting towards the BBC when it came to their coverage of the Iraq War and the very disgraceful lead-up to that Iraq War when Alistair Campbell and
well, what was he trying to do? What was his like?
Well, so he was very upset that the BBC had been doing critical coverage of the sexed-up dossier. And, you know, there are disputes over the particular reporting, but what we do know, what was undeniable, is that Alistair Campbell wanted the intelligence report to be in line with what the United States, what George W. Bush was saying. So I think they tricked us into that war, essentially.
But also, yeah, they were wrong. The key point was that they misled the country.
Yeah. Right.
Alistair Campbell and Tony Blair, on this particular issue, we were misled.
Well, there we go. Alistair Campbell obviously pushes back very strongly in those allegations. However, today's Union Jackass is Alistair Campbell. There we go. Yes, well done. Fantastic. Look, thank you very much for my wonderful panel. Thank you for dedicating your Friday evening to us. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I will be back. Oh, I'm doing New Year's Eve breakfast with Emily at 6 a.m. on Sunday, so I'll see you then. Headliners next, though.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alex Burkill. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast. There will be some frost around tonight before wet and windy weather arrives in time for the weekend. That's in association with a deep area of low pressure currently out in the Atlantic. This will sweep its way in across the UK as we go through the next 24 hours or so. Ahead of that, some quieter weather for a time as many of the daytime showers ease and clear away, leaving some clear skies for many, but a very wet and windy picture towards the far northeast of Scotland tonight. Under the clear skies, particularly towards eastern parts, likely to turn quite chilly, a touch of frost in the south, a widespread harsh frost across parts of Scotland. So a bit of a frosty start first thing on Saturday morning, but then turning increasingly wet and windy as this system makes its way in, pushing northeastwards as we go through the day. As that rain hits the cold air over Scotland, we're